No, this isn't a video about us
flexing our muscles
or Flex Seal or us flexing on anybody. Nope, none of those. This is a video about having as much traction as possible while off-roading with your Jeep, buggy, truck, or SUV. That's right, in today's video, we're going to be explaining the art of axle articulation and the benefits of having a rig that has a balanced amount of suspension flex for on-road and off-road performance. Hey, what's up guys? Josh from TrailBuilt, and there is no doubt that if you've ever been around the off-roading community, you've probably seen someone flexing out their rig, meaning that they are driving one of their tires up on some type of obstacle. But why? What's the point? What's all the hype about when you have a suspension system from TrailBuiltOffroad.com that allows you to drive one of your tires up to the top of a rock, somebody else's tire, or an RTI ramp without lifting one of the other tires? Well, my friends, there are a few different reasons, so make sure and smash that subscribe button so that way you guys can hold on to the ride with us. Ready? Let's go. Before we get started, if you didn't already know, we have a giveaway going on right now until May 15th to win a set of 5 Method race wheels. The best way to get entered is by heading on over to our website at trailbuiltoffroad.com/giveaway and picking yourselves up one of these awesome t-shirts. Also, a percentage of the t-shirt proceeds will be going to help out our friends over at Team Rubicon. Team Rubicon is a veteran-operated disaster relief organization that is there to help out communities in need after a natural disaster strikes. For more information on the giveaway and Team Rubicon, we'll also have a link posted in the description below. There are many tricks of the trade when it comes to getting your rig suspension to cycle as freely as possible to keep all 4 tires planted on the ground, and we're going to get into that shortly. But first, let's answer the question of what is flexing when it comes to our off-road rigs. The definition of flexing when relating to our rigs comes from the term flexible, which means being able to change as to adapt and respond to varying circumstances. In our case, it's the ever-changing off-road terrain that we seek out to conquer that is the varying circumstances. Flexing out the suspension can also be known as articulating the suspension as well. It's just that articulating isn't as cool of a word as flexing, but both words have very similar meanings when applying them to our rig suspension. Having a rig that has a lot of flex or articulation means that there is more up and down wheel travel at each corner. Now, this isn't factoring in any types of variables or modifications that can allow a rig to flex even more outside of the shock's capability, like a frame that can twist, for example, or certain cantilever style suspension setups, or the positioning of the shocks where they're mounted on the control arms, and the list goes on and on. But we're just going to keep it simple and refer to the most common aftermarket suspension kits that we carry on TrailBuiltOffroad.com. Well, now that we understand what flexing, articulation, and what wheel travel is, there are several key advantages to wanting your suspension to be able to adapt to varying terrain. But the most notable one is to try and keep all 4 of your tires in contact with the ground at all times to maintain traction and forward momentum. A tire that is hanging helplessly up in the air is just extra weight at that point, because if it's not clawing, grabbing, biting, gripping, or chewing at the ground below, then it's up to the other 3 tires, or possibly 2 tires that are still touching the ground, to hopefully have enough traction as to not be stuck in the spot you're in. Situations like this can become precarious for several reasons. One, you might have to rock your vehicle back and forth to regain traction, and that can be hard on your drivetrain or your back, or maybe you'll have to start stacking rocks under the tires, or maybe place traction boards under your tires. Maybe you'll have to run a winch line to get unstuck. Either way, and although those methods will typically work, it's best and it's safest to be able to stay in the vehicle and maintain forward momentum by having all 4 tires touching the ground. Now, if your differentials have the ability to lock the axles together and put power to all 4 of the wheels, then lifting a tire may not stop your forward momentum, as the tires that are still contacting the ground will still have power going to them and might have enough traction to keep you going. But if you have an open differential or open differentials, both front and rear, then chances are good that once you lift the tire, the power is going to take the path of least resistance and go to the tire that's up in the air, leaving you to consider alternate measures of getting unstuck. Another advantage to having a suspension that allows more flex and wheel travel is stability. Stability is equally important to having traction, if not more important than traction. Losing stability could lead to flopping your rig on its side, or even worse, rolling it over, and that will, in most circumstances, not only cause damage to your rig, but to yourself and quite possibly others around you. Having a suspension that can roll up and over the obstacles without transferring the inertia to the rig's chassis is going to be a lot less likely to roll over than a suspension that is more rigid and doesn't have the ability to absorb or soak up the size of the obstacle. Ever see a stock Jeep or a modified Jeep in a YouTube or Facebook video that doesn't have a whole lot of suspension flex or wheel travel, and then they try to climb up on another rig's tire or some sort of obstacle, and then they flop over on its side without even barely trying? And on the other side of the spectrum, seeing a rig that has a ton of suspension travel, and they climb right up and over the obstacle and make it look like there wasn't even anything there. That's because their suspension is designed to have a lot more flexibility and capability than obviously a stock rig or even a slightly modified rig. The next question to answer is, with all of these variables in suspension systems, the shocks, the vehicles, tire sizes, etc., how do we measure the performance of how well our rig flexes? Well, if you ever heard the term RTI ramp, then you may already know. But even if you have heard that reference before and not sure what it is, or you've never heard of an RTI ramp, then this part is for you, and it's pretty simple. RTI stands for Ramp Travel Index. It's a formula that spits out a score, and that score is the common denominator as to how your rig's suspension flexes compared to other rigs. The formulation to calculate the score is, well, first of all, you'll need an RTI ramp or some sort of obstacle that mimics the dimensions of an RTI ramp. These RTI ramps typically range from 15 degrees to 30 degrees and are most commonly found at off-road shops or Jeep and truck shows to test out the suspension or for friendly competition. To determine the RTI score, we take our rig, throw it in 4-low, and drive up the ramp with one of our front tires until one of the other 3 tires is just about to lift up. Before the rear tire is just about to lift and while it's still touching the ground, we then measure the distance up the ramp to the front tire and then divide that number by the wheelbase of your rig. Once we have that number, we multiply it by 1,000, and the final calculation determines how well your rig can flex. Stock rigs will typically score between 400 and 550, with the more heavily modified rigs reaching scores of over 1,000. Now, with all of that said, one of the major challenges of having a flexi suspension is that if not designed properly or certain precautions aren't taken to control the suspension at higher speeds, then you're basically going to be stuck going slow either on the trails or on the road. A really flexible suspension at low speeds is great, but at higher speeds when cornering or evasive maneuvers or even racing in the desert, you'll have a lot less control over the rig because the rig's chassis and body are going to have a tendency to have a lot more what's called body roll. And that too can lead to a flop or more likely a tumbling rollover causing serious injury or worse. This is where certain suspension modifications will give your rig the best of both worlds. Things like quick disconnect sway bar links, or some vehicle makes have electronic disconnecting sway bars. Also, the design of the suspension can make a difference in the overall stability of the rig as well. Different types of shocks and properly tuned shocks can make a huge difference. And again, the list goes on, but fortunately for you guys, all the suspension systems that we carry on Trail Built are designed for your particular vehicle's application in accordance with either safety regulations or manufacturing specifications, and as long as you aren't being careless or negligent, we'll provide you with excellent suspension flex and off-road performance without sacrificing too much of the on-road stability and performance as well. And of course, we all know that anytime our suspension is modified, or anything else on our rigs is modified for that matter, outside of the original factory specifications, that we are already assuming a personal responsibility to drive our rigs in a manner where control and safety are our #1 priority, for not only our own sakes, but for those around us as well. Right, Brent? Warning, do not attempt this stunt as it was performed on a closed course with all proper safety precautions in place and a semi-professional driver behind the wheel. Well, now that we all understand what flex is and a little bit more about suspension systems, there is only one more thing left to do, and that is to head on over to trailbuiltoffroad.com, of course, to pick up a new suspension kit for your rig, and while you're there, might as well toss in a set of wheels and tires right away as well. Also, I realize that there is so much more to suspension systems, wheel travel, axle articulation that we can cover, but I'll leave the rest up to you guys. So if you guys have any additional information to add, or if you've had any crazy experiences with flexing out your rig, make sure and let us know in the comments below. Or if you have any questions as well. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and thumbs up to like the video. And as always, we appreciate all of you for watching. I'm Josh from TrailBuilt, and we'll see you guys out on the trails.